Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Islam Study Circle. We'll start off our study circle with the first segment, which is we will read a verse of the Quran and then try to explain it. So this is verse 59 from the fourth surah of the Quran, which is Surah Nisa. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu atiyu Allah wa atiyu Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. Believers, obey God and obey the Messenger and those of you who are in authority. However, if you disagree among yourselves in any matter, refer it to God and the Messenger if you believe in God and the last day. This is better and more seemly as regards the consequences. So it's very evident from this verse, dear viewers, that as far as the Quran is concerned, it holds the rule of law in high authority and in high esteem. It says that, of course, no law can be made which is repugnant to the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet and the form of the Sunnah. And at the same time, people who assume the helm of affairs of a country, the laws that they enact, they cannot be disobeyed. Yes, you can have your own difference of opinion regarding that law, but you cannot create anarchy by disobeying that law. You have all the right to criticize the law. You have all the right to have it changed through a majority consensus or a majority mandate on that particular law. But until that law becomes the law itself, or until that law is changed, you have to follow that law in letter and in spirit. This is one of the very, very forgotten lessons, I would say, of the Quran. We have forgotten the fact that as citizens of a state, we are not just bound by our own religion, of course, which we are. At the same time, our religion tells us to follow the law in letter and spirit. And it is here that we need to understand how important it is that when we obey the red light, when we don't cross the red light, we are not only following the law of our country, we are also following the Quran. Similarly, when we obey other laws, like, for example, it could be traffic laws, it could be tax laws, it could be income laws, it could be laws related to your hygiene and cleanliness, it could be laws related to safety. All these laws, they have to be obeyed. And I have already said this earlier on, that obeying a law does not mean that you always agree with it, but for the sake of not creating anarchy, you follow that law until the time comes when the law itself can be changed through a majority mandate. So legislation which is done in an Islamic state is something which can obviously be redone, it can be re-adjudicated, re-legislated. The parliament of an Islamic state or a Muslim state is the supreme body. And in that body, any law which is tabled, any ordinance which is tabled will, of course, as soon as it is passed, will assume the law of the land. So such is the importance of the law of the land that I would like to also cite an incident which took place in the times of Prophet Muhammad, which shows how important it is for all of us to follow the Quran vis-a-vis in following the law. So it is said in a Hadith narrative and also cited in history that once when the companions of the Prophet were gathered before him, so one of the companions, Sa'd bin Mu'az, had asked the Prophet that if I see my wife in a compromising position with a stranger, should I not chop off the head of that person? So it is reported that the Prophet remained silent. And the Sahabi or the companion asked this question again. He posed this question once again to the Prophet. And this time also the Prophet remained silent. And we know from our own reading of history and the biography of the Prophet that whenever he would dislike something, he would remain silent and not say anything. However, the companion still persisted. And he asked for the third time, if I see my wife in a compromising situation with a stranger, should I not chop off his head? And the Prophet became red in his face and he became angry also. And he said, Allahu aghyaru minka, Allahu aghyaru minka, wa ana aghyaru min. Ana aghyaru minka, wallahu aghyaru minni, which means that I am more honorable than you and God is more honorable than me. let the law take its course. Even if in such an extreme situation, you see that someone is, there's no more rage which can be overcome in a person than when he sees his own wife in such a situation. So look what the Prophet said. He said that even in such a situation, you cannot take the law in your own hands. You have to report the matter to the concerned authorities and then let them take action against whatever crime has been committed. So the importance of not taking the law in one's hand, in obeying the law in letter and spirit, and at the same time having the democratic right to differ with the law, all these things have to be understood. And I think this is one area in which not only as followers and as people who are the citizens of the state and the followers of a religion, that we need to follow what we have just studied, but at the same time, we must take a leaf out of this book and reserve it for our younger generation as well, because to them it is of supreme importance that we become an example that as far as obeying laws are concerned, as far as obeying regulations are concerned, we have to respect the writ of the law. It is something which will create peace and harmony in society, even if the laws are incorrectly legislated. Such is the nature of obeying the law of the land. So now let's move on to the next part of our study circle, which is the hadith that we study. And today that we're going to study a hadith which relates to anger. So the Prophet is basically a hadith which is reported in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, and something from Abu Huraira, and he says, Anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qal, Laysa shadidu bis-sur'a, innama shadid allazi yamliku nafsahu indal ghadab. So Abu Huraira reported that God's messenger said, a strong person is not the one who wrestles well, but the one who controls himself in anger. So anger basically is the sign of a weak person. It's not always misplaced. It's not always wrong to get angry at the injustices suffered by people, to get angry at the wrongs which are found in our society. Is something which is very, very laudable, and something which is very commendable. So it's only misplaced anger, or anger which is shown at the right or the wrong time, is something that has to be restrained. So anger in itself is not something condemnable. However, when you let your anger overcome yourself, and that too in a way, or in a situation in which you should have controlled your temper, it is here that the Prophet has said these beautiful words, that it's not, the strong person is not one who wrestles and then wins that match or a duel. The strong person is one who is able to control himself when he is overcome with anger. And no doubt about the fact that when we are overcome with anger, when our adrenaline is pumping and we are red in the face, all our emotions, we are so fired up, and there's such a frenzy that is found in ourselves that we think that anything that will come before us, we're just going to, either it's going to talk about it in a way that's going to demean that person or abuse that person, or even when matters reach much worse, people in a state of rage, they go on to even raise their hands on other people and go as far as killing them. So such is this gruesome nature of anger, that when it is left unchecked, it can cause such havoc. So restraining anger, controlling anger, managing anger is the name of the game. But as I said, anger in itself is not something condemnable, because when anger arises in us, especially in situations when we see injustices being done to people, then it is that right channelization of anger that is needed. So to channelize your anger, you have to first of all understand that the most important thing when we get angry is to delay our reaction. So as soon as we are able to delay our reaction, we are able to give that person or our own self that break, as a result of which our own emotions, they tend to get normalized, because this peak that we get of 10 or 20 seconds in which we are filled with rage, it does not stay there. That rage is bound to come down. So all that we need to do, first of all, in controlling anger, is to just delay our reaction maybe by 30 or 40 seconds. And for this, we can do a number of things. For example, deep breathing. For example, changing our posture, changing our location. uttering sentences which have a calming and a soothing effect on us. And if all these things are not working, we can even use this physical release phenomena in which we can just punch a pillow or pick up a bat or something and use it. I mean, not of course on the person that we are getting angry, but by hitting something soft, so that physical thing which has been burnt up in us, which has really impelled us to do something, it gets a release. We are able to vent up our emotions. And then there are long-term measures as well, which we can adopt in this matter. For example, to train ourselves that if there is something unexpected happening in our life, or we come across unexpected happenings, so more often than not we get rage, we get furious. So to program ourselves, to tell ourselves that whenever something happens which is not according to our expectations, then actually what is happening is in accordance with God's will. So we have to accept God's scheme. So at times we think that our scheme is the real scheme, but many a time, or I would say most of the time, we realize that we look back in hindsight that whatever happened against our expectations was actually in our favor. It was only in that time, in that particular time, that we thought that something has happened against our wishes. So to reflect on the grand scheme of God in our normal life, if we do so, when the crunch time comes, we can always connect that to that happening and tell ourselves and advise ourselves that if something is happening against our expectations, then there is something good in it, there's something expedient hidden in it, and we might not realize that at that instant. Similarly, we also need to do this or adopt this method that we call self-suggestion. And in this method, which is a psychological, I would say, training that we can give ourselves, is that whenever crunch time comes, we should imagine that we will talk to ourselves. And for that, before that crunch time comes, we imagine in our own mind that when a situation of rage or fury would arise in ourselves, we will control ourselves and give ourselves a break. So this is like suggesting to our own selves that whenever this situation arises, I will try to calm myself. I will not behave in an impetuous way. So when we start giving these positive vibes to ourselves in normal circumstances, I mean, this is an area in which we need to educate ourselves and reform ourselves and inform ourselves in our daily lives, that whenever I get angry, I must control myself. So when the time comes to get angry and you are really angry, you immediately recall that past experience in which you had told yourself, in which you advised yourself that I'll not lose my temper, I'll not lose my composure. And that is something where it'll give you that couple of seconds of break in which you can really apply your own brakes and really try to soften the situation. Another thing which is important as a long-term measure in restraining anger is that we should generally lead lives which are comfortable, which are free of stress. You see, what happens is that we are already living our lives at the brink of stress. I mean, it's just a point away. Our boiling point is very close to just come up with very small blemishes. And it is here that we need to understand that if we are leading a life which is full of stress, then becoming angry becomes very easy. So in our normal lifetime, we must try to lead a stress-free life by accepting a lot of things that we are not able to accept, by exercising regularly, in which, of course, we are able to relax, by indulging in our hobbies and pastimes, which make us relaxed individuals. So if we are relaxed individuals in our normal lives, then it will be difficult to make us come to a point in which we get angry. So that will take more time. However, if we are stressed, then, as I said, the threshold is very close to the surface. As soon as a little trigger comes, we will start to get angry. And another very important thing is that as adults and as people who grow up, we know what are our trigger points. I mean, there are things which, I mean, we as our own personality would tell us that these are trigger points, these are the points, or these are the situations in which if I face these situations, I will get angry, or I will just get that trigger that will stimulate my emotions and make me furious. So If I am able to control that situation such that I avoid these situations in which these triggers are avoided, then that is also something which will help us manage our anger. So it's not always possible. Of course, I mean, there are things that are virtually beyond us. But if we are able to manage this, if we are able to manage that at times, we know situations in which we will get angry. So we can just pull away from those situations. And another important thing that can mitigate our anger is that, especially when we get angry at individuals, the immediate thing that we can do when we get angry at such individuals is to bring to our mind the positive contributions of that person, or the good traits of that person from which we benefited. And this is especially true for your closed ones, for your husband or wife or children or parents. We know their positive contributions in our lives. So as soon as we get angry on them, we should recall some of their good traits and the good terms that they did with us. So this will sort of do a balancing act. And the anger that we had for them will be balanced by those good emotions in which we are able to laud them and praise them for the contribution they had made in our lives. And viewers, if all this still does not work, because you see, this needs a lot of training. You have to these short-term measures have to be adopted. These long-term measures have to be adopted. But if we fail, and still, in spite of trying to exercise restraint, we are still not able to do so, and we lose our temper, then we have to understand that we must make amends. We must apologize to the aggrieved party if we have said something in a harsh tone, or if we have done something other in a way which is absolutely unbecoming, then we must atone for that. So to say sorry, to apologize, to make up for whatever we did while we were angry, that is imperative. And if it is done again and again, you have to apologize again and again, and you have to make amends again and again. So this is another important thing that we have to understand. Hopefully, if these measures are adopted, inshallah, we will be able to restrain our anger. Now we come to the third segment of our study circle, which is a verse from the Bible, or a couple of verses which we study from the Bible. Today, we're going to study two verses from the Bible. This is the Gospel of Matthew, chapter number 22, verses 37 and 38. And he, Jesus, said to him, "Have love for the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest rule." And you can see that as far as the greatest commandment is concerned, this is something which Jesus has spelled out in such a authoritative way here, and has said that as far as the greatest commandment is concerned, it is to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our soul. And by using these phrases, he has actually advised us that our intellect, our emotions, our instincts, and everything that we are composed of should have that focus towards God. As our own intellect is concerned, we should have that intellectual confidence in us that yes, if we believe in a God, then he is an intellectually understood reality. We are not just believing in God for the sake of belief in him, or because our parents told us to believe in God, but we are believing in God because it's our own discovery, because we think that yes, he is a being who exists, and he is someone who created us. He has the attributes which divine scriptures and of course the Quran mentions very copiously. They tell us that as far as the being of God is concerned, we just cannot have an idea of what God is, or what he's composed of, but we can know him through his attributes. We can know him through his practices, and this is the only way that we can have knowledge of him. So that is why we find so many attributes of God being mentioned in the Quran, and we also find so many practices of his that are mentioned in the Quran. And the second important thing, as these verses say, is that to love God as well. I mean, to have that connection with him in our hearts as well, which is something very similar in a very small way, just to have an idea of what it means. Just as we instinctively reach out for our mothers, we have that. I mean, it's like that love, that gushing fountain that comes out of us as love for our mother, and it is something that we cannot suppress. So it is these emotions that have to be connected with God as well, that we connect to Him immediately, just as we connect to our mothers, to our parents, because of that deep connection. And why is that deep connection so palpable in the case of our parents? Of course, it is because the way they treat us, the way they bring us up, the way they groom us. But if we try to imagine on a larger scale, that on a larger scale, the Almighty does the same things, but in a much greater way. In the magnitude is pronounced. So the way He looks after us, the way He creates things for us, the earth has been created for our comfort. Had it been, had the temperature of the earth been slightly different, a couple of centigrades, life would have been impossible on earth. We would not have been able to survive. So on the contrary, not only do we survive on this earth, we thrive in it with pleasure. We see the birds and the flowers and the mountains and the winds and the stars and the moon and the sun, all serving us, all playing their role in nourishing us, and which gives us this tremendous feeling of being drenched with the love of God. So if we have to connect with God, of course, we cannot see Him, but we can feel Him. We can really feel Him. And that feeling is something which is our greatest treasure. We know that we are being looked after. We know that someone is taking care of us, someone who is incomparable, someone who can be seen or who can be witnessed at a very, very minute or a minuscule level, if we compare that to the love of a mother. Just as that love is instinctive, it is unconditional. It is something which works for us all the time and in all situations. In a very similar way, the Almighty takes care of us. So if this becomes an intellectually discovered reality, the way I just said, and it also becomes an emotionally founded reality, this will make that connection so strong that, as Jesus has beautifully put it here, that we will be able to love our Lord with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. And He has not just said these words or these three beautiful phrases. He has said one thing at the end as well. And He said, this is the first and the greatest commandment. So it is the first and the greatest commandment, that you love God in a way that is incomparable, that is something which cannot be equaled with any other love. And believe me, viewers, that this is something which is achievable. This is something that we all can strive for, that God connection, that strong God connection. It's the greatest treasure that we have with us, or we can have with us. We can relish it, we can cherish it, we can sleep with it, we can walk with it, we can eat with it, we can drink with it, because every time we connect to God through various means, through various ways, we will be able to see a part of His being working for us the way we would like Him to do so. So with these words, we move on to the fourth section or the fourth segment of our study circle, which is generally a discussion which is moderated. And today we are going to talk about the positives and negatives of co-education, something which is, of course, common in most societies. So over to you, Mariam, if you could moderate this discussion, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. While we await any hands that are going to go up, I'll start off with my 2 cents. So I think one of the big benefits is that later on in life, if you plan to work, you'll have to interact with people, all kind of people in general. So having that co-education helps you cope better in terms of, how to interact with others, how to word yourself, and so on. One of the downsides to that is early on during high school, a lot of people, teenagers, you end up having those self-confidence and self-esteem issues, and that could get worse. I think I personally went to an all-girls school, so I can't say much, but just looking at other kids, I feel that sometimes it gets worse, or they try to show off a lot more to the other sex that's around them. So, those are my 2 cents.
Okay.
There are a couple of raised hands. So, Bisma Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saleem. I feel that because life itself is co-education, so it would be so much easier for both genders to kind of uh, adjust to each other if co-education was always an option, with the right guidance at school. Because I went to an all girls school also, and while it was a wonderful school, and I'm very blessed to have been a part of it, but I feel it kind of at some level makes you a little self conscious when you kind
Mhm.
of are trying to adjust into a co-education lifestyle. So and then I feel that people, and then of course for postgraduate it was um, co-education institution. So I think the comfort of having to act with the opposite gender in a natural way is just, it just makes life easier. Plus I also feel it's easier to find life partners, and so many people who go to postgraduate and colleges and universities end up marrying each other. So it also
Mhm.
is because they are exposed to the opposite gender, and they may meet people who they may or may not feel that they can have a relationship with, and then they decide to get married. I think that is another thing which makes it so much easier. While of course there are lots of downsides, as Mariam pointed out, when kids are
Mhm.
growing up, they're self-conscious. But it makes for an easier life, and that novelty of the opposite gender kind
Mm.
of goes away if you grow up together. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I'll try to share mine as well, but let's have other people as first.
Okay.
Noshad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. But I think Mariam and the lady who just spoke have said almost everything that needs to be said on that. I think it's a very positive thing to have co-education because it gives confidence, less to the girls, I think, more to the boys. They get confident in life, they can face situations, and it makes them better human beings because they understand the viewpoint of the other gender, and therefore I am fully in favor of that. I think those people who study in co-educational institutions, they turn out to be better human beings as such, and therefore I think that's the positive side of that. Thank you.
You,
Thank you.
in order to get more participation, I'll try to add a bit more oil to the fire
Mhm.
here. Um, so one of the things is how when both sexes are in competition with each other, that could end up becoming detrimental. So I have a few friends that speak very badly of men. Um, Even though, they've been interacting with them their entire lives, but they always seem to be insulting them. And I am not fond of that trait. But I think coeducation is one thing that helps them sort of realize that one, generally girls are getting
Mhm.
better grades, they're doing better academically. If you look at colleges, there a lot of the fields, I'm not talking about, there are specific fields that are male dominated, but there are a good number of fields that are also becoming more and more female dominated, and girls are doing very well. So that sort of sets men back a bit. Also,
Mhm.
there's also a more recent culture of like hate on cis white males. At least
Mhm.
here in the US, you get to hear about it from some people. So I don't know if co-education, having it or not having it, would help with that. But you know, those are
Mhm.
certain other
Right.
factors might make it harder for them going on later in
Mhm.
life if they're constantly told that you're bad for the society or
Mhm.
you're bad for this world. So Habiba Zafar, please go ahead.
Sir, Assalamu alaikum. Sir, my question to
Right.
you is कि पाकिस्तान में आहिस्ता आहिस्ता ये चीज़ें बदल रही हैं और so as in पाकिस्तान हम देख रहे हैं कि co-education की acceptance बढ़ती जा रही है और सब कुछ ठीक हो रहा है. बट सर अभी भी कुछ ऐसी जगह हैं जहाँ पर इसको अच्छा नहीं समझा जाता, पर उधर कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है और यूनिवर्सिटीज़ थोड़ी हैं। तो उधर जब कोई लड़की अपने आप को कहीं किसी और शहर से आई है, बड़े शहर से आई है और वो उधर आके पढ़ रही है, उसे अपनी लिमिटेशंस का पता है, उसे तकवा का पता है, शी नोज़ हर लिमिट्स, बट वो उसके अंदर सोशल स्किल्स अच्छी हैं, उसके अंदर सोशल जीनियस है, वो पार्टिसिपेट करना चाहती है, वो पार्टिसिपेट करती भी है। बट क्योंकि वो मुआशरा शायद आहिस्ता ग्रो हो रहा है, अभी तक वो उस तक पहुँचा नहीं है कि जहाँ वो इस चीज़ को एक्सेप्ट करे, तो दिस इज़ सो पेनफुल कि समटाइम्स शी इज़ बीइंग जज्ड सिर्फ़ अपनी क्लासमेट्स, मेल क्लासमेट्स की वजह से ही नहीं, बल्कि कुछ मेल टीचर्स की वजह से भी। और ये चीज़ बहुत ज़्यादा आपको डिस्टर्ब करती है जब आप ये देखते हैं कि यार लाइक आई एम बीइंग जज्ड फॉर जस्ट बीइंग माई सेल्फ। और ये चीज़ आपको बहुत तकलीफ देती है। आप चाहते हैं कि आपको पता है कि व्हाट आर द लिमिटेशंस, लेकिन बिकॉज़ आप हमारे कुछ जगहों पे कॉन्फिडेंस को कैरेक्टरलेसनेस के साथ कंफ्यूज किया जाता है, एंड दैट इज जस्ट सो पेनफुल। एंड आई समटाइम्स आल्सो गो थ्रू दिस। तो व्हाट डू यू हैव टू से अबाउट इट? बिकॉज आई नो एंड माय अल्लाह नो दैट, एंड आई नो एंड ही नोज के मैं जानती हूँ कि मेरी क्या लिमिट्स हैं एंड बाउंड्रीज क्या चीज होती है, बट समटाइम्स जजमेंट आपको बहुत ज्यादा पेन दे रही होती है। तो व्हाट टू डू इन दिस केस?
Right. Okay, these are some of the very pertinent points that you have made. So let's hear from others, if there are others.
There are. Saima, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
My
assalam.
point of view is that like I have studied from both the systems, co-education as well as all girls. So if we have opportunity, so we should send our children for sometimes purely co-education, and sometimes if they are just boys or just girls, because like when you see yourself what fits to you, and then they have right to choose what they want to. Are they comfortable with all boys or
Hmm.
or all girls, or are they comfortable with co-education?
Right.
So because I have gone through both the systems, they both have pro and cons. So but it's depending on your comfort. Like, are you comfortable learning things with the co-education, or are you comfortable learning with when all boys or all girls? Thank you.
Right. Uh-huh.
Bisma, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I, also feel that, when if people aren't exposed to each other from a younger age, then the genders, especially in societies like, say, third world countries like Pakistan or other countries, and I can talk about Pakistan because, of course, I was born and raised there. Um, you know, of course, I'm much older now, but as a younger person, the opposite gender will stare at you and look at you and just stand like they're looking at some object, because they have never been, it's never been normal, for them to deal with the opposite gender. Whereas in other societies that may also be, a similar developmental stature in the world, if people have been exposed to the opposite gender, they know how to deal with each other. They will deal with you like a regular person. So I feel it's so important for us to interact. You can wear any kind of clothes and people are going to be comfortable if they've been exposed to talking to a girl in jeans or pants. And yes, it's becoming better. I agree, it's becoming better in Pakistan, of course, from the times we were there. But I still feel the pace is so much behind, because everything is given a religious aspect. Whereas in countries like Indonesia, in Malaysia, which are also Islamic countries, women and men do interact with each other at a normal level, and there's a lot of decency, there's a lot of discipline. But I feel when we kind of crush that instinct of a man and a woman to interact with each other normally from childhood, we are making them feel that the other gender is the other. It's something novel, it's something alien. And I feel that kind of in itself is a concept that needs to now go away in the modern society of the internet. So that's just my 2 cents again.
Right.
So yeah, you can take the discussion up. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Nagir, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Is Ahmed from UK.
Right,
Dr.
Amin.
Sahab, I've been in this education system from the last many years, and I have seen the students here we have here co-education. Students are comfortable. All the students, girls and boys, both are comfortable with each other when they have a education. But the problem is, once they grew up, the especially the boys, when they grew up and they get in the age of marriage, they prefer women's not from their society, because their main concern is because the girls got some exposure when they are talking with the boys, and they have some confidence as well. But the boys which are rooted in the Asian part, they are thinking that the girls are become very outspoken, and because there is generation gap as well, and that when they look at their parents and they look at their old generation, they will see the old women, and they will realize that the girls which are coming out, they are not kind of that women. So their preference is not in the UK. They are preferring the girls from outside, from the UK society, or like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and they will prefer getting married over there. So this is another aspects of the society, which is no doubt bringing the men and women together, being a co-education. But this aspect is also very, very concerning as well.
Right. So it has an indirect impact, I would say.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Shazia Khan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I just had a comment on one of the sisters that was commenting about the difference. Maybe we should allow co-ed in Western society. It is allowed, so it is a good thing. I grew up in co-ed. I studied from like preschool in the 1970s to the end of my career in Pakistan, and it was co-ed. And it was so normal for us. I think it gave us a lot of confidence to talk to boys. It was not like when we went into med school that we were shy. We were very confident talking to the boys. And there was nothing about the restrictions or the staring, and none of that happened growing up in school. And my girls, they went to co-ed, obviously, here in Canada. And there was a lot of this sexual kind of tension, or I don't know what to say, but this happened in Canada. It did not happen in Pakistan for me. So I think a lot of the sentiments are individual, and a whole lot is about the adults in the school system. So the teachers, your parents, how they react and how they make the atmosphere feel normal and comfortable for the children. I think that's more important. Just like one of the sisters said, if you go to co-ed in a smaller society where there's not an acceptance of this system, that's what makes it weird. It's not the children that make it weird, it's the adults in that school system that make it weird.
Right.
Thank you very much. To those of us who are just joining, our topic today is about the positives and the negatives of co-education. I would like to add a few more points after listening to everyone. So one is going to an all-girls school. There were quite a number of lesbians there because there were no guys, and those that were not married later on around during the freshman year, they would form or like go after the most boyish looking girl and try to get her attention. On the other side, here where there's co-education, there's more and more sort of gender identity crisis there that is going on. So kids that they feel like they want to transition during their school years because, puberty is tough. It's a tough time for kids growing up. And so they feel uncomfortable. And so they feel that transitioning is, gonna help them become more stable. So that is sort of a negative to this whole aspect. And I feel that if you have two separate school systems, one for guys, one for girls, at least they'll all be sort of going through the same puberty changes more or less within the same years. And so it might make it easier for them to adjust rather than feeling that they have gender dysmorphia.
Right.
Okay, and then Bisma, please go ahead.
Yeah, so when I was referring to, and this is responding to the wonderful lady from Canada, what I meant to say was that when people aren't used to a co-ed system from their childhood, that's why some of the men back home are, because they haven't grown up in that co-ed system or learned to deal with the opposite gender in the correct way, because it's still such a novelty for them. That's why they stare and their behavior is so odd. If people were allowed to interact from childhood, like we do with our siblings at home, with extended family, with cousins, with neighbors, then the confidence would be twofold for women and men both. Plus, I also feel, as the lady said, that if the adults in the room, the teachers and the parents, don't make the other gender seem like the other, then I think things would be so much easier for discussion, for respect, because I also feel that, sometimes men don't know how to interact with women and women don't know how to interact with men. If they haven't been in coeducational systems from childhood, suddenly when they get married and they go to a social event or they have to work, they don't know because they've never done it before. And I feel there has to be more of an Islamic education on the fact that men and women were not supposed to be segregated. They were supposed to coexist together. That's how the society is. And I feel everything would be so much more normal if the society was co-educational from childhood. And as Mariam just said, I also went to an all-girls school, and yes, there were always those girls who were very pretty and feminine looking, who somehow tried to get the attention of the women or the girls who were playing sports or were a little boyish looking. So that also develops, and then it's the same way with the boys' school. They are lots of, gay boys. And because of this separation, so I think there should be an education through the channels of Islam also, that there is no reason to keep it so segregated, heavily segregated. We were meant to interact as long as we keep the right, gaze and the right intention. I think everything is okay.
Thank you. Habiba Zafar, please go ahead.
Yes sir, I also want to add a point कि मुझे sorry पहले पता नहीं था, मैंने थोड़ा सा देर से join किया था. Thank you so much Mariam for correcting me at that time. I thought maybe it's a Q&A session after discussion. मैं ये पॉइंट ऐड करना चाहती हूँ कि आज के माशरे की ज़रूरत ही है बीके को एजुकेशन, और क्योंकि जब एक लड़की को एजुकेशन में जाएगी, शी वुड नो कि अगर मेरे साथ गलत हो रहा है या मुझे डोमिनेंट मेल्स के साथ किस तरह इंटरैक्ट करना है. इसके बाद जब आगे वो ज़िंदगी में उसकी शादी होगी, उसको पता होगा कि यार मैंने अपने राइट्स को किस तरह कम्युनिकेट करना है अपने हस्बैंड के साथ, अपने फादर इन लॉ के साथ, अपने इन लॉज में जो मेल्स हैं उनके साथ. एंड दिस इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज जब इवन फॉर एग्जाम्पल व्हाट आई फेस इसके जब आप यूनिवर्सिटी में होते हैं एंड जहाँ आपकी क्लास में ज़्यादातर मेल्स हों, तो इट रियली बिकम्स डिफिकल्ट. लेकिन आपको बहुत ज़्यादा कॉन्फिडेंस आ जाता है बिकॉज आपको बात करना आ जाती है और आपको ये पता चल जाता है कि आपने अपने राइट्स के लिए किस तरह बोलना है रिस्पेक्टफुली विद द ऑपोजिट जेंडर. तो बहुत वही बात है, जितना आपको एक्सपोजर होगा, आप जितना एक्सपोज्ड होंगे अपने ऑपोजिट जेंडर से, उतना ज़्यादा आपको पता होगा कि रिस्पेक्टफुली अपना मैसेज उन तक किस तरह कन्वे करना है.
Right. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone's participation. That was it for all the raised hands, Dr. Saleem.
So, okay, I mean, this is a very important and a very sensitive topic as well. But I think the basis or the I would say the foundation of this whole debate or discussion lies on the fact that what exactly is the nature of the co-education system that we are going through. For example, I mean, Muslim cultures will have a different co-educational setup. Western schools, obviously, they do have a different co-educational setup. And you see, these co-educational setups, they are governed by the norms that every society is used to. So there could be areas or there could be cities or countries for whom you would not be in favor of sending your child to a co-education system. And there could be other societies and cultures in which you would think that, well, it's absolutely fine. So I think there are two important questions that we have to address here, that while living in a country, at times you don't have a choice. So if you live in a country like Canada or US or Australia or any Western country, which are predominantly, I mean, on most, I would say, cases, they are co-educational, you don't have any choice. But then there could be slim choices as well. We have all, same gender schools in such countries and societies as well. Other than that, I mean, I think it's more a question of managing education in the right way. If we are properly groomed, if we are told that basically as human beings we have to remain pure as much as possible, to keep ourselves occupied to constructive pursuits, at the same time giving importance to decency, the fact that this decency starts off by guarding our gazes, by not letting our gazes on our sights lusting over the opposite gender. So I think in such situations, if these norms are inculcated at a younger age, I think that coeducation would work in favor of both the genders, because as you have all said, that the curiosity factor, the factor in which you become timid and shy if you're not exposed in the right on the right stage in the right time, all these create that gender gap, I would say, or gender communication gap. So I think if coeducation is managed properly, I mean, in which decency is made to rule, because after all, as some of you have said, that we are living in a society which is not segregated. I mean, you're not living separately. I mean, it's not that all the men are living in one part of the society and all the women are living in another part. That's not how it works. Our homes are places in which our families visit each other, cousins interact with each other. So we are living in societies which are, I mean, they are already exposed to one another. The gender exposure is already there. So if it is there and you create a small island through a school, it might not work. So I think it's more a question of managing education in a way that you are able to groom your younger lot at a younger age regarding the norms of decency, modesty, telling them how important it is to remain pure as much as possible, telling them that they must have a mission in life, a purpose in life, they must have constructive hobbies. So you see, personalities that they develop if everything is not allowed to concentrate on the opposite gender. What happens is that during puberty and adolescence, these are the two, I mean, this is an age in which there is a tremendous attraction between the genders. And as you can see that whenever education is managed in these ages, let's say, I mean, they vary from country to country, but puberty and adolescence, wherever they are, and if both genders are studying in such a school, more time is spent on your own clothes, more time is spent on your style, more and less time is spent on substance and your own education. But you see, what happens is, if this small area, this small time, I say small because if you compare it to the whole education system, this time is I would say 30 or 20% of the whole time of education, in which you are exposed to one another, in which these emotions, they run high, these opposite attractive emotions, they have a very I would say they have surges and they have peaks in them. So if before that happens, I mean, before we reach puberty, our children reach puberty and adolescence, if their grooming is done in a way that their own parents, the society that they live in, they are able to tell them or make them clear that as far as life is concerned, indulgence and going wayward in terms of your own emotions is something that has to be controlled and restrained. So I think it all boils down to how you can control and manage and sort of set an example before the younger generation. If that can be done at a wider scale, I don't think that the cons of co-education system will outnumber the pros. To me, the pros are more than the cons. But the only thing is that if you are able to manage it properly. In Western societies where they are co-educational, I mean, they are in a way that at a very younger age, they get exposed to one another. And because of the sexual promiscuity, not in just schools, but in the society in general, you see, the society in general, promiscuity is common and the norms of decency are different. I mean, I would not say that they are indecent societies. I would say that the norms of decency or the perception of decency is different in those societies, and which maybe to Muslim society is not digestible or not palatable. So I think that when you are exposed to those schools in which, if you go by statistics, you'll find that many girls and boys, they lose their virginity before the age of 14 or even 13, or the statistics vary from country to country and society to society. But it's not because of that exposure in school that this happens. It is because that's exposure in general. I mean, you are going out with each other, you are going to beaches, you're hanging out with each other. These are out of school activities. So it's not just the school which is playing their part in these Western societies. It is the type of society that has come into being overall, not just schools. So schools are just one part of that society. So that one part is reflection of the other part as well, in which that promiscuity, I would say, if I use a word slightly more communicative, or I would say that the nature of modesty and decency differs, and the fact that extramarital relations outside of wedlock, they are not considered to be, yes, they are considered to be inappropriate even in Western societies, but somehow this is something where they are ignored, and it is now an acceptable norm in Western societies that before marriage, you'll hardly find anyone who is not, virgin in the legal sense. Most of them, I'm talking about, a lot of people who are living there, not just Muslims, that who, if they lose their virginity before marriage, it is something which is very acceptable. So this has become acceptable to them. So as I said, it all depends on the nature of that co-educating system or co-educative system that you come across. In some cases, you don't have a chance, or you don't have an option. In other cases, you have an option. And still in other cases, as I said, if it is managed properly, then I think that as far as co-education is concerned, it might work in favor of both genders. So lastly, I would say that maybe a better option here is to propose that if you're living in a Muslim country, then in that Muslim country or that Muslim society, in general, the role of genders has to be managed in a way that decency and modesty and bashfulness, all these values, they reign supreme. So if they reign supreme at the society level, at the social level, they are bound to reign supreme in the schools and in the educational systems as well. So you see, education cannot be isolated from the rest of the society. You just cannot expect the rest of the society to get, if it is exposed to one another in the ultimate way, and then suddenly you send your boy or girl in an all-girls school or all-boys school. So as some of you have pointed out, it will just, it's just going to have that effect that instead of having extramarital relations, you'll have extramarital relations of the same gender. So it's just going to work the other way. So in the case of schools which were exposed to one another, in which both genders existed, you'll have out of wedlock relations between the opposite gender. And in the case of same gender schools, you have the same thing happening. Only thing is that the gender would be the same. So in effect, it's the same sexual challenge that will be faced by same gender schools and different gender schools. So I think effectively, as I said, it boils down to the fact that you have to train your next generation, and before that, your own selves to proper norms. And if that we are something that we are able to achieve, then I don't think that this can become a big question at all. I think it can be easily managed. And yes, there would be still some deviations, and there would be still some sort of things that might happen that we might not expect. But then I think these are things which would in any way happen if the system was not there. So I would just sum up by saying that it all depends on the nature of that co-educative system. If we have a choice, we can really create a very beautiful blend of a co-educative system in which norms of decency can be adhered to and maintained, but not in isolation. You cannot do it in isolation. It has to be done at the societal level. If it exists in the society, it's going to exist in the school as well. If it does not exist there, you just cannot create an island. And so basically you have to train and educate the society and our own minds in general, so that the system that we adopt in the form of a school will be in harmony with, it will be aligned with what we can imagine happening in our own society.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for that incredible explanation. We're going to start moving on to our Q&A session now. So, a question in the chat asks, people are sharing different du'as in Masnoon Hadith to read them for our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Can we forward or share those du'as, or what should be our behavior in such a situation where people are sharing those du'as? And the du'a they sent is a particularly harsh one. It says, Allahumma munazzil al-kitab, sari' al-hisab, ihzim al-ahzab, Allahumma ihzimhum wa zalzilhum.
So I think the prayer should be a general prayer, which should, of course, uphold the norms of justice as well. So, I mean, we know that there have been extremes on both sides. There have been, the way these killings have happened, it's not that they have remained confined to combatants, but we have found out that, of course, this is something which is now common knowledge, that innocent citizens have been sacrificed, and this has happened on both fronts. So innocent Palestinians have been butchered, and innocent Israelites have been butchered. I mean, we have to be fair that wherever citizens and non-combatants are figuring, then that is something which is not on. So war has to be fought between armies and between state, and not between organizations and in a state. So I think regardless of these principal issues, the prayer that we should maybe make to the Almighty is that we should realize that as far as war is concerned, it is no solution to any peaceful any peaceful or any, I would say, conflict that is going on in a regional sort of on a regional platform. So basically, avoiding war and finding peaceful solutions is the right way to go ahead. And I would like to endorse the statement given by the Pope. I think this was last week that he gave, and he said exactly the same words, that war is not a solution to regional conflicts. It has to be done on the basis of bilateral relations, through bilateral talks. And if this doesn't happen, then resorting to war and killing innocent civilians on both sides is a heinous crime. And this is being committed by both sides at the moment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Bismat Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
Dr. Saleem, it's very hard to stay quiet in this issue. That's the prudent thing to do when one is living in the West, because of the strong sentiments that are on the other side. And the war is very one-sided. That we all know, that it's a very one-sided war. How is one supposed to react if they are put in a situation where a direct question is asked, or if a child, if my child is studying in a school that is, has a very strong lobby, and I'm asked to speak of an opinion, what is the best route to stay, neutral? I don't want to stay neutral because it sounds very harsh, but then what is one supposed to do? How does one react?
I think
because
I tried to make my point here that, you see, whenever you launch an attack on civilians, which Hamas did, I mean, the first strike was made by the Palestinians when they struck Israel and they massacred civilians. This is absolutely uncalled for. So the first step was taken wrongly. It has to be, if you're fighting, it has to be in the open. It has to be between combatants, between people who are trained for this purpose. You just cannot kill civilians. If Israel is doing that, it is absolutely wrong. If Palestinians are doing that, it is equally wrong. So we have to be unbiased. We have to see. I mean, it's not just because one is Muslim and the other is not that we have to side by the Muslims. We have to side by by justice. And that ruling of justice is that killing civilians is not on in any sort of war. Whoever does this is guilty. So I think this is how we should explain to our critics as well as to our admirers that we would not take sides with people who wage war with civilians. And that is what has happened in this case. And at the same time, we will also say that war is no solution to regional conflicts. You have to sit and see the way things are going. And if one one party is acting as an oppressor, I mean, that is acting as a party who is oppressing the other, then by retaliating on equal footing and becoming a bigger oppressor is not going to, it's not going to solve problems. It might settle your ego, it might vent your emotions, but in all probability, this is not going to be a permanent solution. The solution has to be peaceful, come peacefully, and in a way that you don't indulge in cross-border firing, nor do you indulge in massacring the lives of civilians.
So when we're addressing something like this, it's best to keep history out of it, because only basically comment on what happened and in the moment, and then the reaction to it, which is,
Yes, I think so. You see, had Hamas not done what it has done, they wouldn't have elicited such a huge reaction, and
response.
That is still continuing.
Okay.
And they are still
Exactly.
saying that we are going to, you are now providing, you just presented yourself in a plate to get yourselves killed. It's like a suicide mission that has been done. So why is it that, you don't have any planning, you know that you are outnumbered massively. So what was the point in doing all this? It's just like throwing something without realizing the impact of it's going to have, or the response is going to have. So I think it was not a very wise thing at all in the first place. And secondly, as I said, it didn't target the army in any way. It targeted innocent civilians. We know on the other side of the border, Israelites and Israelis who were citizens were killed. So if they, in response, they did start killing civilians amongst Palestinians, I would not say that was correct. But then you asked for it.
That is true. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Gives perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Just adding to that, I wanted to bring up, for example, the Muslim countries, or like people like us who live in the West, if we reach out to our senators or congressmen regarding this issue, what do you think would be a good way to tell them, how to deal with the situation? And can we explain to them that in the first place, whatever Hamas is doing is anti-Sharia? For example, they have hostages. That is completely not allowed in Islam. Right. Do you put down these things?
Of course, you see, when you analyze something, you have to analyze the follies of your own people as well. You cannot condone them simply because you belong to the same religion. If they are doing something wrong, if they are holding hostages, if they are as I said, tampering with the lives of civilians, this is something which is a big sin in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the Quran. It says that you just cannot kill a civilian because that civilian has no role in the war that is going on. He is just a bystander, an observer. And what right have you? Of course, when the two countries they are at war with one another, when there's an open war between the armies, then yes, it does happen that at times civilians are killed as a collateral damage. But this is not what's happening today. What has happened last in a couple of days. What happened was that missiles, whatever airstrikes were launched, and ground forces, they infiltrated into the land and territory and ended up killing civilians. So I think this is something which are on the part of the Palestinians cannot be condoned, and of course, in the case of the Israelites or the Israelis also, we have to understand that they have a stance, and we have forgotten that there was this solution which was presented many years ago when Israel was being formed by the United Nations, that the city of Jerusalem, should be given in the control of international forces, and all these three religions should be allowed to practice religion in the temple, in the Masjid al-Aqsa, the way they would like to do. So this holy land, or that holy land, which is holy to all these three Abrahamic faiths, should be given this option that they can do so in a peaceful way, in their own way, and being managed by international forces. But this is something that initially no one accepted, or a greater majority did not accept. And as a result, we have been witnessing a diminishing area of Palestine. What Palestine was in 1948 and what it is now is just a fraction of its original territory because of these skirmishes which they have to face against their own selves. So, I mean, there are peaceful solutions. There were, I think this was one of the most peaceful solutions that I can think of, that the holy city being managed by international players and forces, and allowing all these three Abrahamic faiths on equal footings to carry out their religious rights. So I think if this had been accepted, I would have, I mean, it would have been a very, very prudent way to go about this whole exercise. And then one of the things that we have also to accept is the fact that Israel is a country that was born in 1948. So, I mean, it's on the map, it's on the globe. So this attitude of some Muslim countries, I speak for Pakistan especially, that of not recognizing Israel is just I mean, I don't understand why this attitude is being adopted, because it has now been created, whatever the reason or whatever the origin, or however you might differ with its formation, it is now a reality. You just cannot say that we do not accept. It's a ground reality. Not accepting ground reality is like shutting your eyes to the sun. It is now a country which is recognized by so many other countries, and even now we find, I mean, in the recent history, we find so many Muslim countries recognizing Israel as a sovereign state. So I think it should be recognized as a sovereign state. You should have bilateral relations with them. You should negotiate with them, and try to manage your living on the globe, because after all, we are people belonging to different cultures and societies, and we have to have this formula of peaceful coexistence.
But Dr. Saleem, isn't that what's Pakistan not accepting Israel? That is extremely wrong. I completely agree with you. But my question is, isn't that the wrong preaching of all the so-called Muslim scholars that have been basically brainwashing the youth of that country, or bringing Islam into it constantly? Isn't that the reason behind it?
So this is one of the reasons. Yeah, this is one of the reasons that they think that this is an area which should only belong to the Muslims. They have a history behind it. We know the Crusades. There was a period in which I think it was like 100 years in which the city of Jerusalem belonged to the Christians, and it was I think around in the 12th century when Salahuddin Ayyubi he liberated Jerusalem from the control of from the Christian Empire, and right from there until the Ottoman Turks, it remained in the possession of the Muslims. And then again, we have wars being fought regarding the possession of that land. But after the declaration in 1917, that became known as the Balfour Declaration, we know that the British Empire at the end of the First World War had promised that if the Jews helped them in the First World War, then they would give them this land that they were looking for in 19. So this is what happened in accordance with the Balfour Declaration. So I think if you look at the world stage, foundations of Israel were laid much before the actual state came into being, and this was a whole process of history that we just cannot reverse. So if this is something that has happened, we should link it to more a political settlement than to a religious sentiment that our Muslim leaders generally tend to reflect. And yes, having said that, we just cannot in any way not condemn the atrocities which have been committed against the Palestinians by the Israeli forces. Yes, whenever they attacked civilians and they were guilty of, massacring them, that is equally condemnable. But as I said, once a country has been established, and if you don't agree with the nature, you don't agree with how it was established, but because of the fact that these world forces had already made up their mind to set it up, so this is something which you just cannot go against. Whether you like it or not, something has been created, something have been done, and not everything is going to happen the way you would like it to happen. So you have to accept it and move along in life.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Noshad Shafqat, please go ahead.
Yes, Dr. On this Palestinian issue, it is wrong, I think, for all of us to be dubbing it as a war. this is not a war, this is a conflict, because a war would be between two recognized
Countries.
armies
Right.
belonging to
Mhm.
states, and to dub it as a war. And then the hostages that the Palestinians took, I think we need to understand a little background of that, the Jews there, the Israelis, were holding a party right on the border of Gaza
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
celebrating there. In the eyes of people, who were right next to them, they were deprived of all their rights. And maybe it happened. I've seen Palestinian leaders condemn it. Uh, Another point is with regard to recognition of Israel. I'm fully in favor of Israel being recognized. But I think we must understand that recognizing doesn't mean that we shut our eyes that Israel doesn't
Hmm.
exist. It only
Right.
means that we don't recognize it on a governmental level. We don't recognize it as a state with whom we can have relations. I think what we should do is to get down to business with the rest of the world. And you suggested a very idealistic solution. If that could happen, that would be like heaven on earth, I think. But
Actually,
as
it
far
was
as
suggested
the
by the United
Israelis are
Nations.
concerned, sir, as far as the Israelis are concerned, I don't think that they are treating the Palestinians as humans. And that is the core of the problem.
Right.
That was it for all of the raised hands, and I look forward to our textual study of the Quran tomorrow, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.